This is Terms of Reference. I'm your host, Stephen Laddick. Blair Glencorse is the founder and executive director of the Accountability Lab, an organization that empowers citizens to fight corruption and build accountability around the world. He is also a Social Impact Fellow at the Center for High Impact Philanthropy at the University of Pennsylvania. Previously, Blair worked for the World Bank on issues of governance and development. In 2014, he was selected as an Echoing Green Fellow and a Stanford Business School Social&nbsp Scholar. I spoke with Blair in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Hi there, Blair. Thank you so much for being on the Terms of Reference podcast today.
Hi, Stephen. Great to be with you.
Where am I calling you today?
I'm in Philadelphia today.
Oh, excellent. I hope that the City of Liberty, no, I guess the City of Brotherly Love, right?
Exactly.
Is treating you well. So tell us about what it is that you do for the Accountability Lab and what the Accountability Lab is all about.
Sure. Well, I am the executive director of the Accountability Lab. I founded the organization about 2.5 years ago, and we work to empower young people around the world to create tools for integrity and accountability and anti-corruption in their communities. We're really trying to create a youth movement for accountability and personal responsibility because we want to create a generation of decision makers 20 or 30 years from now who can make decisions that are more accountable, that are more inclusive, and that can improve the lives of people in their countries. And this grew out of a realization for me, really, over the course of a decade working in international development. Firstly, that accountability is really, really important, and it's at the heart of all of the problems and challenges that developing countries tend to face. And second of all, that there wasn't really an organization like the Accountability Lab that was trying new ideas, that was focusing on innovative tools that are run by young people, that are developed and implemented by young people.
So you've talked about these young people and that the lab is not something that exists anywhere else in the world. What's some of your, pick one of your favorite stories about an initiative that's happening right now with one of your network people about how they're tackling corruption in their locality?
Sure, absolutely. I think one of the issues with the way that we tend to look at anti-corruption and accountability issues is we often see this as a big black hole, a lot of people stealing money and not adhering to rules. And one project which I love at the moment is doing the opposite and highlighting the people that are being honest, that have integrity within difficult places and complex systems. And it's a brilliant TV show that we're developing in Nepal called Integrity Idol. And so we're working with a very dynamic young TV producer on a national TV station, and we're receiving applications from citizens around the country for civil servants that have integrity, that have honesty, that are serving the people in the right kind of ways. And we're picking the top 5 of those civil servants and then filming them doing their jobs, interviewing them about why it's important to have honesty, to have integrity, and so on. And then people are going to vote by SMS and Facebook, having watched these episodes on national TV, for their Integrity Idol. And it's a great way to tap into the popularity of these kinds of TV shows, but also bring in a serious issue that affects people's lives, and get them excited about the kind of things that I think they realize are important if they want to see their countries change in the right kind of ways.
And so do you think that you'll be successful in creating some rock stars out of what would otherwise be mundane civil servants?
We hope so. There are some great people doing amazing things, and so far people seem to be quite excited about it. We've got over 5,000 people on the Facebook page and people talking about it, and we'll see. The first episode is in October, so fingers crossed.
Fantastic. So you said that you founded the lab a couple of years ago. Take me through the process. How did you make the decision to make the jump from being either a consultant or a worker within within this profession to being an entrepreneur, to being a social entrepreneur yourself?
Sure. Well, I'd been thinking about these issues, of course, when I was studying, and then after I graduated from graduate school, I went to work for the World Bank on what they call fragile states, which are post-conflict countries and other countries going through difficult transitions around the world. And I happened to be in southern Nepal talking to some villagers there. This is a very, very poor part of the world. They literally have nothing, and was expecting them, when I asked, what is it that you need? How can we help you? was expecting them to say, we need clean water, we need schools, and so on. But actually what they said to me was, we need justice and we need accountability, because we know that these issues are actually at the heart of all of the other challenges that we face. If people are stealing the money that should go to our schools, our children can't get educated. If medicines for hospitals are being misdirected, people die. So we know that these issues are actually at the heart of all of these other problems. And I knew this anyway, but hearing it firsthand, vociferously from a lot of people there. And since then, a lot of the people I speak to around the world in these kind of places, this is the message that I get. And part of the reason it's such a strong message, I think, is because it's been something that hasn't been focused on enough in the past. It's very easy to come up with technical solutions to some of these kind of challenges. How do we build a school? How do we, build a health center? But the broader issues of sort of the relationship between citizens and governments, and people with power and ordinary people within a given context, I think are critical. So that really prompted me to quit my job, to set up the Accountability Lab, and to think about ways to support these kinds of people who are the people that have the solutions to the challenges they face, of course, and give them the tools that they need and help them build the communities that can make those tools sustainable over time.
And take me through the process of what you just described there. You quit your job and focus on these issues. Was it a sudden decision? Did you prep for it? Were you very methodical about it? Did you already secure your first funding, sort of, moonlighting in the beginning? Like how did you make it a reality?
Well, I went home and thought about it in DC for 6 months or so, began to develop concept notes, talk to people about the issues. I did a thorough scan of the organizations that were already working in this space, because I think, of course, if there's organizations already doing something that you might like to do, then there's no point in setting up another, which may just confuse the situation and duplicate what's already happening. But I didn't see an organization doing quite what the Accountability Lab does, and I certainly didn't see one in the kind of countries that we're focusing on. So there seemed to be a gap. I had some ideas. Then the issue, of course, was persuading people that these were good ideas and that it was something worth funding or supporting in other ways. And I was lucky enough in that I persuaded a small foundation to give me a little bit of money to get things off the ground before I had fully demonstrated the impact of anything that I could do. And in that way, I think this was slightly unusual for me, but was a function of networks that I'd built up over the course of many years working around these kinds of issues. So that gave me the financial incentive just about to take a big pay cut and leave my previous job and really get going on the Accountability Lab. And then from there, I was able to spend almost a year listening, because I wanted to understand these issues more. And so I went to Nepal, I went to Liberia, I went to some of the other countries that we're focusing on, and just asked a lot of questions and received a lot of feedback from people on what they wanted. And that laid the basis then for programming and for fundraising around programs a bit further down the line that we could implement.
Tell me about, the second project and the third project. How do you do fundraising? And on your site, you're very clear you don't accept money from governments or corporations. Where does that leave you? Is it just foundations? Do you do donations? And how do you spend your time, building the coffers?
It's a great question. The reason we're not taking government or corporate funding is because, particularly for this issue of accountability, we want to be independent and we want to be neutral and we want to be objective. And that's a really important component of conversations that we have on the ground in these countries, because we don't have a vested interest in a particular outcome. We're not seen to be implementing a government contract that could be seen as political, or a corporate contract that could be seen as a business endeavor. We really want to partner with people on an equal level and say to them, look, if you have a good idea for accountability, for integrity, let us help you develop that idea. This isn't about us imposing any kind of agenda on you. And that allows us, I think, to have more free-flowing, open and honest conversations that lead to better results over time.
Do you think that people respond to that? I mean, even given the name, it's the Accountability Lab, they really approach you as this is an incubator of sorts?
Absolutely. And the language is really important. It's not the anti-corruption lab. It's the Accountability Lab. It's about developing shared solutions to collective problems. It's not about pointing fingers at people because this is political. As I said before, I think we, the international community, are good at technical solutions to problems. We know how to build roads and so on. But what hinders those projects is not the technical side of things, it's the political side. So a lot of what we're doing is helping people understand within their given context what the relationships are, what the incentives are, what the rules are that exist that they can then use or work with to build their tools and the change that they want to see. So we engage people in constructive ways, and we found even with governments that, in many ways might seem like they're not willing to embrace this kind of work, are in fact happy to chat. There are always change makers within the system. I mentioned the Integrity Idol TV show in Nepal, for example. There are always good people trying to do important things, and if we can work with them and help them do what they're trying to do, then I think that's a more positive place to start than trying to fill all of the gaps that seem to exist.
I see also, you advertise a couple of the foundations that have given you money on your website. Is there also local fundraising that happens? So somebody comes to you with an accountability idea, and let's just say they're in Liberia. Is there co-funding, or are there other initiatives like that, or are you providing most of the funding for the initiative?
Well, we receive money from various different foundations in the US and the UK and Europe. We also crowdfund a fair amount. We have some individual donors. We are now beginning to develop some earned income streams, which I can talk a bit more about. But in every case, we ask the people that we're working with to put in at least 10% of their own resources, whether that's time or money, to the project to build a sense of ownership and accountability from their end for what we're doing. And everything we do it's very small scale, which is the point. It's sort of $2,000 to $3,000 each project maximum, with the emphasis being on trying something new. That's why we're a lab. It's embracing risk and embracing failure, because I don't think it's failure if you learn from it. So we're willing to put in this level of resources with people who seem to have great ideas, with the understanding that these might not work, but that's okay as long as we learn something from it and document it, and we're transparent about the process. Then we can learn from it as can others, and hopefully that over time will make the process of development more effective. I'd
love to hear more about the earned income streams, and I'm hoping that you're going to tell me that Integrity Idol is going to get advertising revenue or something like that.
Well, on a project level, we certainly think about those kind of earned income streams, and we'll see with Integrity Idol. If it becomes popular as we hope it will, and it seems to be, then absolutely there could be room for advertising revenue there. Occasionally on certain projects there's room for user fees. We're doing some community justice work in a low income township of Monrovia in Liberia, for example, where we're beginning to charge very small fees for some of the work there. But on the larger level, in terms of earned income, we are looking at training, particularly for organizations and businesses operating in these kind of contexts, to help train their staff and management on issues of integrity and accountability. Again, because I think in many cases, there are often rules in place and compliance systems and laws that govern a lot of these kind of issues. But in practice, companies have a hard time developing a culture of personal responsibility within their organizations. And I think we've developed some quite interesting learning on how you can do that, how you can empower people within a given organization and team to build systems that work for the organization and for the larger context. And then we're looking at what we're calling social impact tours, which are a great way to show people a very different perspective on countries that we're working in from a very positive standpoint. So we've done 5 or 6 of these now in Liberia, where we take a group of people to visit some of the creative change agents that we're working with, to learn about their models, to understand what they're doing, and to like I said, give them a very different viewpoint, to try and indicate that these places are not necessarily about poverty and insecurity and the kind of image that they sometimes have in the international press, but are actually about lots of very interesting, energetic, creative young people doing fantastic things in the hope that will give them the exposure and the support that they need to continue to do them.
Mm. You've spoken there quite a bit about setting up systems, setting up structures, building pathways for success. One of the things that would intrigue me to learn about is you said you're working in Monrovia, you're working in Kathmandu, you're working in these different places, and yet you're trying to facilitate a learning across these different communities. Do you have particular tools that you do in order to make sure that you're sharing learning and sharing great ideas, or do you have particular systems that you rely on in order to facilitate that community?
Yes, I'll give you a good example within a given context to begin with, and then sort of across contexts. One thing we're trying to do with the Accountability Lab is not just change the way that we're doing development, but also change the organizational form of an NGO in this space. So, for example, we're highly transparent. We put all of our expenses online in real time so that anyone can see what we're spending and where and how. Another thing we're doing, which relates to your question, is we have what we call accountability collectives every month, which are really oral reporting sessions where we bring together all of the people that we're working with in Liberia or in Nepal, and they talk to us about the progress they've made, the challenges they've faced, where they need help.
How do you bring them together? Is it a Google Hangout? Is it a Skype chat, or is it physical face-to-face?
Physically as much as we can. Those people that we work with who are unable to make it physically, we try and bring in either by Google Hangout or phone. That can be tricky in some of these kinds of places, but generally, we get a quorum and we write down what they're saying. And the great thing about that is we get our report, but then they can brainstorm and help each other think about where synergies are, what other ideas might be useful to build upon to help each other out. And it's just a much more fun, creative way of doing reporting than sending them a log frame document to complete in written English, which is often very difficult in some of these places. So that's, it's about contextualizing what it is that we're trying to do, not just in what we do, but also how we create the infrastructure and the frameworks around it. And then across countries, we organize Google Hangouts as much as we can. We're a small organization and we don't have the resources to bring people together, at least not yet, in a physical way to talk about this. But we try and find conferences and help all of the people we're working with apply in the right ways to those and come together and really understand each other as much as possible. Because I think looking at how these lessons apply across contexts and what can be replicated or adapted to different places is really, really important, because often what it is that the challenge that people face in one place has been faced and overcome in another. It's just a question of sharing that learning and then adapting it to the context.
You emphasize on your website, and you've talked about earlier in this conversation, that you want to fail. You want to find failure because you learn from it. Can you give me, your most recent example or your favorite example of when the lab or a project has failed spectacularly and what you learned from it?
Absolutely. I mentioned before some alternative dispute resolution work that we're doing in Monrovia. What that means is we've trained some community mediators in a community there called West Point, which is about 75,000 people in 1 square mile. It's highly populated. It's very, very poor. And therefore there's a lot of disputes because you have lots of people crammed into a small place. And these disputes tend to get taken into the formal legal system, which is very slow, very corrupt, and very bureaucratic. And while we don't want to undermine the formal legal system, we also want to solve these disputes at the local level. So we've trained community mediators who bring the parties together to resolve their disputes in a more sustainable way. We also work with the local court and police station to feed cases back down to these mediators that shouldn't be in the formal system anyway. Therefore unclogging that system and also making that slightly more effective. And these community mediators are representative of the communities in terms of ethnic group, in terms of language, sex, and so on, and are well respected. And this is something that it originated from them. It was their idea. We were very supportive because justice is a really key part of accountability. So we designed the system, we did the training, set it all up, and then no one was really using the system at all. And this is where it's interesting to think about failure as an iterative process and a learning process. And therefore, is it really failure? Because what we what we did was, rather than sort of cancelling things and saying, this was just a bad idea, we really thought hard about what it was that seemed to be the key blockage. And we'd put up posters and we tried to make people aware of the service, but what we realized is that awareness just wasn't getting out. People didn't quite realize what it was that this could do for them. So talking to people in the community, and this is where listening and talking and asking questions, I think, is the key first step. We realized that actually the best way to get the word out about this was through a town crier who had a megaphone. And he goes around every morning now in the community and reminds people that this service exists.
It's the original social network, right?
Absolutely. It's old school, low tech stuff. But it works extremely well. That's the time of day when everyone's in their homes. They can talk about these issues. And so suddenly that began to really get people coming into the system, and build awareness of it and get things going. So it was a design flaw initially on our part, but, we course corrected. We learned from our mistake, and now the system is working well and is actually being scaled up by the government.
You've told us, you're working in Nepal, you're working in Liberia, you have an office in DC, you're expanding your operations every day, but you're still a small organization. Are there systems or tools or strategies you have found to effectively administer this? You have to report to donors, you have to make sure people get paid. How do you keep all the parts together?
Yes, we're luckily growing, and I'm lucky to have a great team supporting me now. We have 3 people in Liberia, 2 in Nepal, and myself and 1 other in DC, but we're soon expanding to Pakistan, so we have 1 person there as well. And my role is changing. The first couple of years of the organization began with listening, as I mentioned, and really spending time in the field, understanding what the challenges are, and possible solutions, and who the good partners would be to work with. And now, having built the teams and built the programs out, my role has shifted much more towards the fundraising and the networking and the outreach side of things, which tends to take place back in the US or Europe. So that part of things I tend to focus on, and then we have the teams on the ground who are managing the day-to-day programs. It's extremely hectic. It often begins with very early morning phone calls to Nepal, given the time difference, and then later calls with Liberia, and then working late in the US to get things done before the following morning in countries ahead of us time wise. We coordinate. We have various tools that we use. There's one called Asana, for example, for kind of project management type stuff. Skype is always a great communication tool. Of course, we chat as much as we can. We delegate as much as we can, and that's something I've had to get to grips with setting up the organization. And when it began, of course, it was only me. To now having a team of people who in many ways are much better than me and know these issues much better than I do. So giving them the freedom to make decisions is really important. And I think we're making progress. We're building communities, and we've been lucky too in that we've had a lot of volunteers who are interested in our cause and who want to help, who we've brought in and who can do a lot of the groundwork for us in a cost-effective and more programmatically effective way.
Let's turn the conversation more focused on your career. Right now, not only are you working in the Accountability Lab, but you're also a fellow at the University of Pennsylvania, and maybe that's why you're in Pennsylvania right now. And I also see that you're a project advisor to Club de Madrid. How do you balance your time between those different requirements in your career right now, and how do they add value to what you're doing?
Yes, I'm in Philadelphia now at the University of Pennsylvania, where I'm at a place called the Center for High Impact Philanthropy, because I am interested in learning more about how we can make philanthropy work better in the kind of places that the Accountability Lab is working. So although it's a sort of separate title, it's very much involved with the larger set of interests that I have in terms of thinking through how to overcome challenges in developing countries. So I'm here on a very part-time basis. It's a couple of days a month at the moment to learn about how they're thinking about philanthropy, and then hopefully begin to to integrate some of those ideas into the way that I talk about the Accountability Lab with these kinds of people, but also how I can begin to help the lab direct funding and other types of resources in more effective ways. The Club de Madrid is also very much part-time, but again is related in the Club de Madrid, which is a leadership network of former heads of state from around the world, is looking at transitional leadership issues in the kind of countries that we're working in. And so much of accountability and transparency is about leadership and understanding who's willing to make the right kinds of decisions. So I've been working with them to identify young leaders in these countries and connect them to former heads of state in an intergenerational knowledge exchange, so that we can really learn from people who've been through some of these processes and transfer that knowledge to the younger generation, the kind of the youth that I was talking about, that we want to create a collective movement within to build a generation of people with integrity a couple of decades from now. So it's all very much interrelated, but it certainly keeps me busy.
Absolutely. Tell me take me further back. You've been doing this for many years now. You've been at the bank. You've been teaching at Johns Hopkins. Was this always the career that you knew you were going to follow, and was this always your pursuit, being a development professional or social entrepreneur, or did it find you in some other way?
I think it was a combination of both. I went to Zimbabwe when I was 18 after I graduated from high school in the UK. I took a year off before I went to university, and I went to teach in a school in Zimbabwe. And that was what really got me very into thinking through why dynamics in certain parts of the world are different, and why certain challenges exist, and how we can begin to think about overcoming them. So when I graduated from undergrad, realized that this was really what I wanted to learn more about. So applied to study international relations and economics at Johns Hopkins at SAIS in DC. And so that then began to take me on a trajectory towards this kind of work. When I graduated, I worked at the World Bank, as I'd mentioned, on these kinds of issues. So in terms of sort of the broad interest set, that was kind of something that began as I graduated from school and really began to experience a lot of the international life that I sort of grown up thinking about. And then the social entrepreneurship piece of this in particular, I think, evolved through my experience in larger institutions and realizing how big they are, how bureaucratic they are, and the value they have in lots of ways, but also the limitations they have in others. And wanting to see if there was a way that I could help create a much smaller, flexible organization that could be more responsive to the people it was trying to help, and more creative in terms of the programs it could generate. And so at that intersection of social entrepreneurship and accountability and transparency, as I mentioned, there wasn't really an organization doing this. And so I sort of threw myself in the deep end a bit and tried to create one. And so far, so good. We're about 2.5 years in, and I think we're generating some good ideas. We're creating some important change, and we'll see where it goes from here.
You've described a process in the fellowships that you have, in the collectives that you participate in constant learning and constant observation. You even said you took a year just to listen. Who's out there right now in the development world or as social entrepreneurs that you're listening to for ideas, or you think is a real bright spot, either in accountability or some other sectors, some other social sector that you say, wow, that's awesome?
I think there's a lot happening now in the social entrepreneurship space, and the transparency and accountability space are both growing quickly. And there's a ton of very good organizations. We joined a shared working space called the OpenGov Hub in DC about 1.5 years ago as it was being set up, which is full of very, very good organizations thinking about accountability and open government and transparency issues, like global integrity, like Frontline SMS, which produces SMS systems for engaging citizens in processes of governance. Ushahidi, which is a mapping tool developed in Kenya after the elections in 2008 and 9. Also very, very interesting. So in that space, there's lots going on. Actually, just before this, I had a chat with the Rockefeller Foundation, and they have an innovation team. And from the philanthropic perspective, I think they are doing some really interesting thinking around innovation, around how you work with complex systems and engage people in new ways to think about new ideas. And there are some other foundations. The Indigo Trust, for example, in the UK is another that's looking at technology and governance and development and what we can do around those issues. And then in terms of social entrepreneurship, there's just tons of really fantastic organizations coming to the fore now. I'm lucky enough to be part of another network called Echoing Green, which supports social entrepreneurs, and that group, which is about 50 in our cohort, has organizations that are doing all sorts of things, from providing libraries through text message in Haiti to developing new ways to create clean floors in very cost-effective manners in Rwanda, to telemedicine work in Ethiopia. Just tons of really, really creative people that have their ears to the ground and understand new ways of thinking about often very old problems. But if any of your listeners would be interested in learning more about specific areas or sectors or people, I would be very happy to chat.
Excellent. 2 more questions for you. First, if you and I were, we were going to sit down, have a cup of coffee right now, we've never met face to face. What's the story that you tell somebody about, either you were super inspired or, oh gosh, this happened that one time when I was in Liberia? What's that one story that sticks with you over the last 10 years and is sort of your hallmark?
A good one is an experience I had in Liberia, probably 4 or 5 years ago now, at the university campus of the main university there, the University of Liberia. Talking to students, I was looking at education at that point and sort of trying to understand what the issues are, and it takes them a while in that context to open up often. And this is I think an issue that we see around the world. It takes a while to build trust, and to get people to really tell you what they think. And we'd been talking about some of the issues they faced, and slowly they began to tell me the truth about some of the challenges in terms of bribery, in terms of awful issues like sex for grades, teachers not turning up, just the level of service that they were getting. And I said, well, what can we do about this? Could we think about bringing in new teachers? Do you need technical support for doing this or that? And they said, no, what we really need is a anonymous, confidential way to report these problems. There's a culture of silence. No one listens to us, and we don't say any of this because we are scared that we'll be punished. So then we began to brainstorm about what might be a solution. And first of all, they came up with a sort of physical suggestions box, but then decided that also wouldn't work because teachers know their handwriting. And again, they could be penalized if they were complaining too much. So then we talked about creating a virtual suggestions box, an SMS suggestions box, where they could send a text message for free, confidentially, to a number, and then an operator could call back to gather information about the problems. And then all of that information could be collected and then could be used with the administration to try and fix some of the issues that came through it. So that's several years later what we ended up doing with the Accountability Lab, and it's been quite successful so far in Liberia, but came about again, and I suppose the principle at the heart of this is it came about through listening, through building trust with the kind of people that we're trying to support, and taking the time to really think about how to develop tools that fit the context and that are owned by the people that want to be part of the change that they're thinking about.
That's a great story, and I love that it has a multi-year arc to it. It started out 4 or 5 years ago, and now you're even implementing it at the lab now. That's fantastic. Last question is something that we ask everyone here on the podcast. You're lucky enough to have found success in this development career. You have just a ton of honors and awards, and you've had some fantastic opportunities to create change. If you were someone looking to start a career right now in development or aid or social entrepreneurship, or maybe change a career, to participate in this. What's your critical piece of advice? What's your, or maybe one or two pieces of advice about how to make success?
Well, I'm extremely lucky to have had a wonderful education and to have had the opportunities I've had to get to where we are. And it's a work in progress, of course. I think there's still lots of areas where we could improve, and we're trying our best to do that. But if I can think back and give advice, I think one would be, as I've mentioned before, listen a lot. There's not much you learn when you're talking. So that's something I've really taken to heart and have tried to teach myself to do. And that relates to empathy and really understanding who it is that you're talking to, who it is you're trying to help, and as a young person thinking about development, what it is that you actually want to do, what is the change you want to see, and why, and then get out there and do it. I know it's easy to say, and that doesn't mean quit your job and go off and set up an NGO or a social enterprise necessarily, although that may be what you ultimately decide to do, even if it's within a bigger organization or within your community or whatever it is that you're able to do. If it's an issue you care about, take the lead and do it, because I think people are drawn to that. It's this is what makes things happen, and young people have the energy, they have they're in touch with technology, and they have the connections and ideas to really create a better future for themselves and everyone else. So go for it, but also be somewhat strategic. Think about what the kind of skills you might need for this, and if you don't have them, see how you can get them. And again, that doesn't mean signing up to do a graduate degree in international development. It might include that, but there's lots of online courses these days. There's lots of organizations putting out really good information about all of these kinds of issues for free. The barrier to entry really has never been lower, given the amount of information that's accessible now without cost on the web. So think about what skills you want. And I would say, as far as possible, definitely get out into the places that you're thinking about, and get some experience there. There's no substitute for being in a place, and talking to people and seeing the challenges and living the challenges yourself, in terms of building the ideas and the enthusiasm and the creativity that you need to be successful.
Blair, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Pleasure.
You've been listening to Terms of Reference, a weekly podcast from aidpreneur.com. Find us on iTunes or at www.aidpreneur.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.